Good day to everyone. We are the Group 2 and today we are going to discuss the human flourishing in progress and development.
Flourishing. So, this is a state where people experience positive emotions, positive psychological functioning, and positive social functioning, most of the time living within an optimal range of human functioning. So, human flourishing on the other side focus on the effort to achieve self-actualization and fulfillment within the context of a larger community of individuals. So, each with the right to pursue his or her own such efforts. And sa flourishing po is in Tagalog o paglago or pagunlad. So, in other words or simple words, flourishing ay tumutukoy sa isang pangkahalataan na estado ng kasaganahan, habang ang human flourishing ay tumutukoy naman po sa isang estado ng kasaganahan at pag-unlad na particular sa tao. Next, human flourishing involves the rational use of one's individual potentialities, including talents, abilities, and virtues in the pursuit of his freely and rationally chosen values and goals. So, human are considered as both the bearer and beneficiary of science and technology. When we say bearer po, a person or thing that carries or holds something, human flourishes and finds meaning in the world that he or she builds. So he may unconsciously acquire, consume, or destroy what the world has to offer.
According to BBC Health News, 2019 meat production today is nearly 5 times higher than the early 1960s, from 70 million tons to more than 330 million tons in 2017. One of the biggest reasons for this, there are many more people to feed. The world population over the period of years doubled and even tripled. Another key factor in this consumption issue is the rise of incomes. People have become richer, showing tripling global average in their income in the half of the country. When we compare consumption across different countries, we can see that typically, the richer we are, the more meat we eat. Therefore, there is a gap between the rich and poor countries according to Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So as the time pass by, mas lumalaki yung population natin. The more population, the more na mas maraming makukonsume. Nabanggit din na the richer we are, the more meat we eat. Why? Because the rich people has access and afford nilang bumili anytime. And it is also part of their lifestyle and preference. Should we help the world's poor? The United Nations cited its goal of reducing the poverty and inequality by 2015 may not be met. The aid is making the majority of the poor in developing countries poorer. It is the fault of the rich countries that the poor countries become poorer. So why is it the fault of the rich countries that the poor countries become poorer? Simply because of unequal trade relationships, debt traps, exploitation of resources, and unfair global governance.
In the context of unprecedented scientific and technological advancement and economic development, humans are seen flourishing in those developed countries. However, such flourishing led to overconsumption of resources in the planet. The use of advanced scientific and technological knowledge supports the growing consumerism culture of the people to crave and to use more of these resources for their enjoyment and satisfaction. Ang halimbawa ng mga resources na to na na-overconsume is energy, minerals and metals, natural resources, agricultural and food products, also water. The succeeding paragraph is the article of Jason Hickel, an anthropologist at the London School of Economics. He criticizes the failure of growth and development efforts to eradicate poverty 7 decades ago. Yung tinutukoy dito is yung trickle-down theory. So last year, heads of the state gathered in the New York to sign the UN's New Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. The main objective of the SDGs is to eradicate poverty by 2030. Beyonce, One Direction, Malala, and many other celebrities were contracted for the publicity campaign, which was billed as the largest in the world. When the SDGs were launched, it was staged as an international celebration. Given all the fanfare, one might think the SDGs must offer a fresh plan for how to save the world, but beneath all the hype, it's business as usual.
The main strategy for eradicating poverty is the same as it has always been: GDP growth. Growth has been the main object of development for the past 70 years, despite the fact that it's not working. Since 1980, the global economy has been grown by 380%, but the number of the people living in the poverty on less than $5 or 3.20 pounds a day has been increased by more than 1.1 billion. That's 17 times the population of Britain. So much for the trickle-down effect. Orthodox economists insist that all we need is yet more growth. More progressive types tell us that we need to shift some of the yields of growth from the richer segment of the population to the poorer ones, evening things out a bit. Neither approach is adequate. Why? Because even the current levels of average global consumption, we're overshooting our planet's biocapacity by more than 50% each year. For the past 70 years, the main strategy for eradicating poverty is GDP or Gross Domestic Product growth, kahit na hindi naman talaga ito gumagana. Some economists sinasabi na kailangan pa ng mas maraming paglaki, while more progressive type says that we need to shift some of the yields of the growth from the richer segment to the poorer ones. But both ideas are not enough kasi sa kasalukuyang antas ng pandaigdigang konsumo, lumalampas na tayo ng higit sa 50% sa kapasidad ng ating planeta bawat taon. We're gonna need a radical and more comprehensive way to be able to eradicate poverty. In other words, growth isn't an option anymore. We've already grown too much. Scientists are now telling us that we're blowing past planetary boundaries at breakneck speed. And the hard truth is that this global crisis is due almost entirely to overconsumption in rich countries. Right now, our planet only has enough resources for each of us to consume 1.8 global hectares annually, standardized unit that measures resources use and waste. This figure is really the average person in Ghana or Guatemala consumes, by the contrast people in the US and Canada consume 4.7 hectares, many times their fair share. What does this mean for our theory of development? Economist Peter Edward argued that instead of pushing poorer countries to catch up with rich ones, we should be thinking of ways to get rich countries to catch down to more appropriate levels of development. We should look at societies where people live long and happy lives, at relatively low levels of income and consumption, not as basket cases that need to be developed towards Western models, but as exemplars of efficient living.
The idea of the developing rich countries might be proved to be strong rallying cry in the global south, but it will be tricky to sell to Westerners. Tricky but not impossible according to recent consumer research. 70% of people in the middle and high-income countries believe overconsumption is putting our planet and society at the risk. A similar majority also believe we should strive to buy and own less, and that doing so would not compromise our happiness. People sense there is something wrong with the dominant model of economic progress and they are hungry for an alternative narrative. The problem is that the pundits promoting this kind of transition are using the wrong language. They use terms such as degrowth, zero growth, or worse, of de-developing, which are technically accurate but off-putting for anyone who's not already on the board. Such terms are repulsive because they run against the deepest frame we use to think about human progress and indeed the purpose of life itself. It's like asking people to stop moving positively through to stop learning, improving, growing. Negative formulation won't get us anywhere. So terms like degrowth, zero growth, and de-developing may be technically accurate, but they can evoke negative connotation of regression or decline, which many people will instinctively resist. The challenge is to reframe the narrative in the way that resonates more positively with the people's values and aspiration, while still conveying the need for a fundamental shift. Perhaps a framing around sustainable prosperity, well-being focused development, or regenerative economics could be more compelling. The key is to emphasize the positive vision of a better, for more fulfilling way of living rather than focusing on the need to scale back or de-develop.
The idea of steady state economics is the step in the right direction and it's growing in the popularity but still doesn't get the farming right. We need to reorient ourselves toward a positive future, a truer form of progress. One that is geared toward quality instead of quantity. One that is more sophisticated than just accumulating ever-increasing amount of stuff, which doesn't make anyone happier anyway.
What is certain is that GDP as a measure is not going to get us there, and we need to get rid of it. Perhaps we might take a cue from Latin Americans who are organizing alternative visions around the indigenous concept of vivien vivir or good living. The West has its own tradition and reflection on the good life, and it's time to revive it. Robert and Edward Skidelsky take down as the road in their book, How Much is Enough, where they lay out the possibility of interventions such as banning advertising, a shorter working week, and basic income. All of such would improve our life while reducing consumption. Either we slow down voluntarily or climate change will do it for us. We can't go on ignoring the laws of nature. But rethinking our theory of progress is not only an ecological imperative, it is also a development one. If we do not act soon, all our hard-earned gains against poverty will evaporate. As food system collapse and mass famine re-emerge to an extent not seen since the 19th century. As mentioned beginning advertising, a shorter working week, and implementing basic income are interguiding as potential intervention to shift our economic model in a more sustainable and fulfilled directions. These types of policies could help decouple of human flourishing from endless consumption and material acquisitions. This is not about giving anything up, at least not anything that's actually important. And it's currently not about living a life of voluntary misery or imposing harsh limits of human potential. On the contrary, it's about reaching a higher level of understanding and consciousness about what we're doing here and why.
And that's the end of our video. We hope that you learned something from our topic. Thank you.